With the Democrats, there's always, I swear, there's always a catch. There's like a catch to everything. And the more I comb through this American Rescue Plan, the more I'm finding some of these catches, right? And so I've heard the Democrats talking a lot about, what they've done for small businesses. And to me, what I always say is small businesses should 100%, especially when it comes to a relief bill like this is where you win over those small business owners as voters, right? Because a lot of these small business owners, they're so much vastly smaller than these huge, massive corporations, right? And so if you have the Republicans, which, in their last bill, they did completely legislate for corporations. Of course, there was, a good amount of direct relief in there too, more so in at least one bill. As far as unemployment was twice as much, the first in the CARES Act, and this unemployment benefit, obviously the direct checks went to more people, but were smaller. They were 1,200. These are 1,400. But obviously they ended up giving another 600 later on the year. But if you just take one bill, compared to one bill, it was fairly similar in relief. It wasn't magnitudes difference. Now, what you can say is the corporate giveaways was much bigger in the Republican CARES Act. I mean, if you don't include the health insurance giveaways, which is a little bit more indirect, I think. Obviously it's subsidies, but people don't see it kind of as direct money just going to them, even though it pretty much is. But as far as the PPP funding goes, there was a lot in the CARES Act for, those corporations. And corporate giveaways, and there was a lot. There was a lot packed in there. But this bill, obviously, the Democrats are in power, complete power, and I wanted to kind of dive more into what they're doing to actually help small business owners. We know that small businesses have been wrecked. I think it's almost like half of small businesses have closed, and like 40% of them are closed permanently, which is just unbelievable. Like, imagine you're a small business owner. You just becoming a small business owner and taking that leap of faith, it's so difficult. It's so hard to be, successful long term as a small business owner in this country. And then all those people that do that are entrepreneurs, great for them. Both parties say that they support small businesses. But, the Democrats, I think, might be perceived as being a little less for small businesses just because of, tax purposes and whatnot. But I wanted to see what was in this bill to help small business owners. And, I saw things like this, like what Bernie tweeted. The American Rescue Plan is the most significant piece of legislation to benefit working people in the modern history of this country. And you see at the bottom there, he says relief for small businesses. So I was digging and combing through, this huge, massive bill, trying to find the place where, obviously the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, was the place that, small businesses were going to go to get that funding in the CARES Act. Now, in this bill, I had heard pretty much nothing about this PPP funding. So I did a lot of digging, and I'm going to kind of take y'all through the journey that I went through, when it comes to this bill and finding, what was in it as far as small businesses. So this was from the Washington Post. It says Biden took a jab Tuesday at the Trump administration's handling of a pandemic era business loan program, saying a lot of money went to larger companies that weren't supposed to qualify. Now, that is true. But what's interesting, well, let's read this as well, because this is the data behind what Biden just said and why that's true. He said that this is from, I believe it's 11alive.com. I'll link it in the description if y'all want to read the article. It says the PPP allowed businesses to get loans to keep their workers on the payroll, et cetera, et cetera. According to the New York Times, about 600 businesses, including dozens of national chains, got $10 million loans. These massive corporations, national chains, where, everything is legislated already for them to get them ahead. They have, the tax cuts, and just everything is legislated for these national chains. And in a pandemic, when they've made billions upon billions of dollars every year, they're still getting $10 million loans. Like that is what was, just unbelievable. Only 1% of borrowers received more than a quarter of the total funds given out, around $143 billion in loans of $1.4 million or more. So that just, one even in a crisis, the 1% of corporations are getting massively bailed out, even in the PPP, which was supposed to be wholly for small businesses. So we already know that like half of that went to, large corporations, because there was no actual checks and balances in that bill for, the Republicans' bill, even though it did pass the House. So, Democrats do have a little bit to answer for there too, but, they accepted a bill. They let a bill go through that, didn't have any type of protections against things like this happening. So now it's the Democrats' turn, right? What are they going to do as far as PPP funding and actually helping small businesses? Because like Bernie said, and like they're selling, there's relief for small business in this bill. Now they don't say how much, and that's interesting. So let's look into it a little bit. PPP funding. After being the centerpiece of the small business support and the coronavirus aid relief, the CARES Act, and the other act that what do they call it? The PPP plays a much smaller role in the American Rescue Plan Act. The program has dispersed more than $662 billion in forgivable loans in 3 iterations over the past 11 months. Now, we already have said that a lot of that went to large corporations, and small businesses have still been completely wrecked throughout this country, which just goes to show that even if half the money actually did go to small businesses, how much of a need there was for small businesses to get assistance, right? So even if you cut that large number in half, even the half was still not enough to help small businesses from going under, because, there's so many small businesses and there's only so much money that they allocated. Now, but with about half of so originally I was like, okay, they only put because you can see later on it says 7.25 billion in additional funding, and that's what I had found, that they only, there was like 25 billion in relief for like restaurants, and then there was like this 7 billion added to the PPP. I'm like, wait, that's like not a lot of money at all, right? And so then I found out that about half of the 284 billion in current funding available, so there's still $142 billion available from the previous acts that has not been given out to small businesses yet. Why? I have no idea. No earthly idea. I mean, it just goes to show that they don't put money into actually having a bureaucracy and a program that could actually, answer all these calls, approve all these loans. And a part of it has to do with the fact that they went through banks to do this, right? Instead of just from the Treasury. So, right. So there was that $7 billion added, and then I found out there was $142 billion left, right? And so that kind of made me be like, okay, they must just be ready to give all that money out. That's why they're not putting a lot in this bill, because there's still so much left to give. And then I found this, and here is what you always have to look for when it comes to the Democrats. Here is the catch. And Andrew Perez does great writing. I believe he writes for the Daily Poster. He said the Biden Small Business Administration just partially gut them policies provision to keep corporate lobbying groups from getting PPP loans. So corporate lobbying groups are basically just corporations hire these lobbyists to get in the ear of politicians and lobby them to, create legislation that actually helps that large business, that corporation. Now, what does that actually end up do? Because, the agendas of corporations and workers are diametrically opposed. Their bottom line is to make as much money as possible, which means that they want to give you as little money as possible in the form of wages and that type of stuff. So they gutted a provision to keep corporate lobbying groups from getting these PPP loans, which are meant for small businesses. You have corporate lobbying groups that are somehow considered small businesses. I don't know how. The lobbying group for these corporations are now going to be eligible to get these PPP loans. So in that already, 150 billion, whatever that they have left to allocate, which we already saw the half of the 600 billion wasn't enough to keep small businesses from going under. They have to that half and the 150 billion that is left. Now you're going to have corporate lobbying groups that are going to be able to actually gain access to these funds, which means even less money going to actual mom and pop small businesses, keeping them from closing. This is just, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable the amount of corruption that, exists in DC. And these politicians like Biden, he's bought off by large businesses, corporations. Same thing with Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, all these figures, the people that are actually writing these legislations. they're bought off by the same people that they're now legislating for, in the sense of lobbying groups are going to be able to have access to these loans. And so I guess Andrew Perez says if they only count federal lobbying as lobbying, then state-focused lobbying groups can still get forgivable COVID loans. So these state-focused lobbying groups are just going to be able to just completely, apply. I'm sure they're going to get approved, unlike the majority of small black business owners and minority business owners that were last in line to get this PPP funding, which I think I'll do a story about that as well. But it's just unbelievable. So there's always a catch. There's always a catch you have to look out for. We'll see how this actually gets doled out. One, I don't think it's nearly enough money that they allocated for it. I'm sure they could have found money instead of, subsidizing Cobra to the tune of tens of billions of dollars. I'm sure they could have put that money, expanded Medicare, which is actually cheaper, and put that money towards small businesses, but they didn't do that. And then Bernie wants to gaslight you and tell you that this is the most significant piece of legislation to benefit working people, even though he knows that some essential workers, if they don't have kids, all they'll get is the $1,400 check. They're thousands of dollars behind on rent, utilities, credit card debt, all that type of stuff. They'll get $1,400. A lot of that will be gone like that, especially because they didn't legislate that debt collectors can't just come take that, garnish it out of garnish it. So, there's always a catch. You always have to keep your eye out for this stuff. I love Bernie for bringing a lot of people into this movement, myself included, but this is gaslighting. It's just gaslighting. He's shilling for the Democrats right now, and honestly, that's pretty sad.